called a vertical bed system. And what we've done is taken that vessel and turned it 90 degrees along with the beds, which allows much more flexibility in the installation of this. It can be either buried below ground or it can be used above ground in a saddle. One of the largest benefits of having this type of configuration is the ease of changing the media out of the unit. Instead of having to have someone physically climb inside this with a full environmental suit and respirator on, they can stand on the top of the unit and through flanged manway vacuum the spent carbon out of the unit and replace it in usually about a third the time that it would take.
How do they reload this?
Well, they typically will use these sacks that the new media comes in, hold it over the top of the unit, and then open it in the media.
Yeah, you mean the super sacks.
Super sacks are used and they disperse this material down inside. Another advantage of having this vertical bed system is that it also allows for a much more uniform airflow and pressure drop across the media bed. There's no chance of it becoming uneven when it's in these beds. Now this nylon mesh is what's used to hold the media in place inside the units, along with the framework made of FRP grating.
And then do you back that up with any kind of a structural framework or anything?
Well, there's a structural framework that's glassed inside the unit, and then the grating is used to reinforce the mesh, and the mesh is strapped to the grating inside the unit.
But in larger sizes, I know that you can only get the grating in 4 foot wide. Do you have a cross bracing or framework in there behind it that's glassed in place so that it won't collapse?
Yes, they'll use angle fiberglass structural pieces to brace it.
All right, that sounds good. And you do get a structural engineering stamp on these things?
Yes, we have a structural engineer that we use on all of these to verify that the structure is suitable for burial, if that's the application, or the pressure ratings for it too. And they will all the shop drawings will be stamped by this engineer.
Good.
Now, are you familiar with the way carbon functions as
No,
water
I'm not.
control?
Or I'd like to hear your opinion anyway.
Well, basically what is done, there's several different types of carbon media that can be used, but it's all an activated carbon, and once the carbon goes through the activation process, it becomes porous, and that allows it to absorb the odors that come through it. Now, it starts at one end, and what we call a mass transfer zone is where the carbon or the odors are absorbed into the carbon. That travels along through the carbon bed similar to the way a cigarette burns. Their only part that is actively absorbing the odors is called the mass transfer zone, and that travels at various speeds depending on your airflow and your amount of odors that it's absorbing until the carbon is completely spent. Then at that point it's replaced.
What happens if you speed up the airflow in there?
Then you're going to increase the depth of that mass transfer zone, but the rate that it moves is still the same.
Does that happen with the other medias, or the same thing, or what?
It still operates the same way regardless of the type of media you're using. These are some samples of our activated carbon. This is in a pellet form or an extruded material as it's called. One of the advantages to this versus a granular type of carbon is that this will give you a much more uniform airflow across the surface. Sometimes there's reason to use two types of media, and this is called a potassium permanganate. A lot of times this will be downstream of the carbon, acts as kind of a polisher, or it will also pick up other odors that the carbon itself are not able to absorb.
I've heard of this stuff. Does this have any other characteristics of it, or anything else?
You probably noticed that its color is quite different, and one of the features of this is that as it becomes spent or is used up, this will start to change color. It'll become more of a whitish color, like an ash, whereas carbon won't change color. The only ways you can tell if this is becoming spent is through use of either laboratory test samples, or on our scrubbers we also offer a dipstick which can be inserted from the outside in through the media bed, and these rings are calibrated and will show you how fast or how much of the carbon has been spent, because this will tarnish. You can keep a log on this by checking it monthly or quarterly, however fast you think that it may become spent. It will tell you when it's time to replace the carbon, and will let you know before you have a breakthrough, which is when all the carbon becomes spent.
Do you have other kinds of carbons or anything, or?
There's several types of carbon, and they're all listed in our catalog. You can have extruded, which is this pellet type, the granular. You can have virgin carbon, coconut shell, which is used primarily in VOCs. There's a caustic impregnated carbon.
And you can get this in granular as well?
Yes.
Because I know that some of our engineering staff likes the granular and prefers to use that versus the extruded. Does this, I guess you call it Spunsorb, does this have any kind of a UL rating or anything like that for fire protection?
I don't know.
Well, I think you better stop there. If I could, I'd like to know on this Spunsorb, does this have any kind of a UL rating?
Yes, it does. In fact, it's the only media that we're aware of right now that does carry any kind of a fire rating. And that's one of the advantages of using it, that it will not burn, and it does carry that rating.
Have you had any experience or been around anything? I've been told that media of this type can be utilized around the restaurant exhaust to control fumes.
It's
different
used in
things
that.
like that.
That's true. It is used in that application. One of the things I'd like to mention also is that even though this is a fairly new market for us, we have personnel in our company that combined have an experience in the carbon absorption business of over 25 years. So we do have a lot of good backup for you. One of the things I'd like to show you.
If I can interrupt, do you have anybody around or involved that has experience in the chemistry side of the thing, or the media is to evaluate the absorption?
Yes.
In different media?
Through one of our suppliers, we have that available. Just to give you an example of the type of a proposal we can put together, this is a quote that we've done for one of our customers, and if you notice, we not only give them a single quote, we also list several options to let them decide which way they want to go, whether it's single bed, multiple beds, single pass, double pass, and give them operating expenses for a year.
Well, that looks like an excellent piece where that you can make direct comparisons.
It'll give you a real...
without a lot of words, because as most engineers, we like to look at the figures rather than a lot of words.
And what you should be able to do if you're considering a wet scrubber system is they should offer some kind of a similar format to give you an idea of what your costs are going to be up front and as an operating basis throughout the year too.
That looks very good. Do you do this, when do you like to get involved with a project?
Well, as early on as possible, because that will allow us to give you our input as to the type of system that may be most advantageous to you from a cost standpoint, as well as from a physical standpoint too, what type of unit will fit in a given area. Again, that's gets back to a real big advantage that we have with these vertical bed units, where they can vary them. A lot of cases you might be in an application for a pump station where it's in a residential area, and there's a big concern about visibility. You know, you may want to put this vessel underground with just a blower above ground and a small screening around it. If it's a large industrial facility, then you may not be a big concern. They can mount it in saddles above ground, and by doing that, it makes it easier to multiplex these units together, because you can have them in parallel if the air quantities are large enough to require that.
How large can you build this vertical bed system?
Up to 50,000 CFM.
All right, and how do you do that? how big a round is that, or give me some idea of the dimensions
Okay.
of that type of vessel.
Well, what you have is a unit laying on its side like this with various configuration as far as your inlet and outlet, and you can have either a draw-through or blow-through system depending on the fan configuration. So what you can do is have a large manifold which connects these units together, and then have your discharge on the other side. Now the only thing that stays the same on this is your access panel or access openings. These are always on the top of the unit, which allows the media to be vacuumed out and then replaced.
One of my concerns is with this, what would happen if you're showing this mesh, and I've seen this mesh is the same as used by any of the large competitors out there with the split bed systems or the single pass systems. They most of the time have to replace this at every change out because it either gets ripped or whatever. How do you manage to do that so that or can you remove this, or what goes on with that?
Well, it can be replaced, but because it's in a vertical configuration instead of horizontal, it doesn't take as much abuse through the removal and replacement of the media. But it is held in with nylon tie straps to the grating, so it can be replaced if it does become damaged.
When you put this down, how do you get rid of any of your condensation or anything like that?
Well, if these units are buried, we recommend that a sump pump be installed in each unit. And it shows on the drawing that there's an access for that, and then it's pumped out to the surface.
Another question I'd like to know is that how do you obviously have this as a pass. Can you put secondary passes, or can you do so that you can separate it, or how do you deal with it?
Well, yes, you can add up to 4 beds in one of these units, and like I said, you can either go with all carbon. By adding additional beds, you're going to extend the life or the amount of time that this will be in use.
Let's stop this right now, because he's not getting.
So again, one of the advantages of going with this type of system is that in each pass you can have up to 3 beds with possibly 3 different types of media, one absorbing odors or chemicals that the other one won't.
You mean 3 different, you could go through 3 different passes in that one bed?
Right, one bed.
One site.
And these bed depths will vary, or the depth of the carbon can vary from 18 inches up to 36 inches.
Do you have a size overall thickness that you like to use?
3 feet is good because it'll give you the lowest possible pressure drop. And with the fact that these vessels go up to 14 feet in diameter, it allows us to handle more CFM with one vessel than you would with a horizontal bed system. Plus, you're still maintaining a lot lower profile, where you'd have to be in a vessel 25 feet high. With a horizontal, this one's only going to be up to 15 feet high. And if you partially bury it or totally bury it, then it's going to even cut it down more.
Right. And theoretically, there is, if you wanted to, then it appears to me there's no limit on how many of these beds you could put out there if you wanted to manifold it. It's just how big do you want to build it?
That's correct. You manifold it and add more fans.
What happens when you're around the water table problems? Have you thought of that, or come up with any ideas how to? I mean, this thing would tend to float.
Well, we do have calculations for hydrostatic pressure, and so there would have to be a system that would tie these down to prevent that from happening if they are buried.
Well, of course, you've had a lot of experience with buried ducks, so yeah, you should have no problems there, I would think.
That's correct.
Now, with this, how do you work the dipstick when you have this thing as a buried unit?
Well, it would be on the top side, close to the access opening for the refill.
So it would be up to the same level so that you could open that up and see it without
That's
getting
right.
in.
And then when the media is replaced, you'd replace the dipstick too.
How, if I want to, how can I take samples out of that media?
You could have a sampling port that would allow you to draw those out at any point along.
Well, it makes sense. So I see this as I'm looking at it, that you could open that manway and pull right anywhere you wanted along that manway. And actually you have free access to it, unlike the split bed system where you only have usually 3 accesses, you have unlimited, so you can take it anywhere you want.
That's true. If it's above ground, if it's buried, you're a little more limited as to how you can do that.
Have you looked at what you have to do for that sump? I would be real scared around H2S that you might have to have explosion proof or whatever, just for safety precautions. Or have you thought of perhaps putting a pump external somewhere and just running a pipe over to that?
You can do that either way. It doesn't really matter. If you could have it inside, that way no one can tamper with it if it's in a public area. If that's not a concern, then yes, you can locate it outside. And one of the other things that we recommend too is the use of demisters if there's a consideration of saturated fumes entering the scrubber. A demister is going to help eliminate a lot of that too and cut way down on your condensation problem.
Well, that sounds real good. I did have another question I wanted to ask about your this thing here. Do you have any problems if we call you at any time? We get into the early ideas of we think this is what we would like to take a look at least to make comparisons. Do you have any problem of giving us multiples of these or doing it over and over? If we change our mind, as you know, our clients usually ask us to try many different scenarios.
No, that's not a problem because it's all done on a spreadsheet and the numbers can be plugged in any way you want. You know, it's real easy to play what if and work out different configurations for you. That's not a problem at all.
All right, well that sounds real good. I have not really any other questions other than I see you have over here a sample. Is this what your liner and like that?
This is a sample of what the construction would be like for the vessel itself. You know, one of the major reasons for using FRP is corrosion resistance in addition to its strength to weight ratio. And this is a good example of how uniform a filament wiring product is from a wall thickness standpoint and structural standpoint. And then it will also have an internal corrosion liner such as the one shown on here.
No problem, you can gel coat it and do all of that. So
You can have whatever color you
it
want.
seemed like you have all the seismic or anything like that you need there.
Well, that's what our structural engineer was, where we rely on him, is to come up with seismic zone ratings. And in some cases for ductwork, wind load is also a consideration, not so much with these.
Well, it sounds real good to me. I think this is something worth looking at. I'd certainly like to talk with you and if we could get a catalog and I think take a little more in depth and work with you on the next time we have a project coming up.
Okay, well we do have some units in service right now. If you had a chance, I'd like to get together with you later and we could take a look at some of these if that fit your schedule.
By the way, well, it might be a little difficult for me to get to where you have. Are you going to have either some video or pictures of those upcoming units that you have going on?
Yes, we will have some pictures of them during fabrication and installation both.
By the way, do you have any kind of a small unit that you can bring out to a site or do anything? From time to time, some of our clients like, especially with working something different, they'll want to see it and evaluate it themselves.
Yeah, we do have a working prototype that's on a skid, which we haul around on trailers. In fact, it's in use right now, and it's something that we can bring by for demonstration.
All right. Can we stop a minute? I'd like you to have...
Yeah, well, we do have a small pilot unit that's a skid-mounted unit with blower. It's 3.5 feet in diameter and can be taken around to any site.
Now, it took them about 4 hours to rectify their mistake.